Alright, so the shove guide. We're going to start off pretty basic. So what is shove? It's a button you press that will light stagger shovable enemies. I'll get into what shovable enemies are later, but for now it's basically all you need to know. How do you shove? You can press C to swap to shove whenever. That is the default binding. I've bound it to F, which is also a side button. But you also, when you have your melee weapon out, you can press right click and you will do it. Another thing you can do with shove is if you swing your melee weapon and then start shoving, you can get 2 fast shoves. Admittedly, this isn't super useful, I feel like. There's never really been a time where I've used that, but it's a nice little bit of trivia or something that may come in handy. I don't know. It's cool to know. Who cares, really? You can shove multiple enemies with a single use of shove, which is very useful if you need to run through some enemies and stagger them. You can shove quite a few enemies in this game, ranging from babies, strikers, all the way up to nightmares and chargers. I'll put a list of all the things you can shove. It's quite a few, and it's quite useful to know where you can and can't shove. As for enemies you can't shove, it'll be a lot of the big enemies. You can probably guess quite a few of them, I imagine. But I'll put a list up anyway. You can shove moms, and you can shove sleeping enemies and stuff, and they won't wake up. Anything that's sleeping will not react to you shoving them if they can't be shoved. So, you can shove the mom, and nothing will happen. It'll be quite funny. The different weapons use a different amount of stamina for shove. So for example, hammer does 5%, spear does 5%, bat does 2.5%, and knife does 0. It should also be mentioned that they do not reset your resting timer for stam. So you can shove, and you won't stop regenerating stam, but it will still use stam, obviously. Basically every other thing in the game that uses stam will reset your resting timer, but this is the only thing that doesn't. The different melee weapons also have different ranges. So shove's range is a sphere around the player. It's centered in front of the player slightly. The hammer has a 1 meter range, same with spear, whereas knife and bat have 0.7. It should be mentioned that trying to shove crawlers with bat or knife can be a little rough because of the smaller range. Shove is most often used for stun locking enemies to scream cooldown. The best or most common way that this is used is if you wake up an enemy and you need to shove them to stop them from screaming. You will just stun lock them with shove by constantly spamming shove at them until they scream, and then you can kill them. And this avoids waking up the room. The other way you can do it is you can kidnap an enemy, such as a charger, which has the longest scream cooldown in the game, which is 40 seconds, I believe. And you kidnap them and you abuse that to get a lot of stealth done without having to worry about an enemy screaming for a while. This is pretty rare and hard to do in an actual game, but when you do it, it kind of pays off, I'm not gonna lie. You can shove a nightmare to interrupt their melee, and it will put it on cooldown for 7 seconds. No other enemy with melee has this because their cooldowns are simply too short for it to matter. But it is very, very useful for nightmares because you can shove them and then reload your gun and just kill them, and it makes it very, very safe. And that's kind of it. There's not an insane amount of info on shove. It's a pretty basic tool in the game, but I still figured there was some interesting things worth mentioning and giving an explanation of. So anyway, I hope something was useful here.